Howdy y'all, welcome back to the channel. Thank you for being here. Today we're going to talk about Martello Towers, simply known as Martellos in some parts of the world, and these were round coastal forts that stood by themselves, singular castles, so to speak, that were built all around the world on the coasts of Canada, America, Africa, Australia, Asia, Europe, and even in the Middle East and Sri Lanka. Now, these coastal forts, or Martello castles, were up to 40 feet high, and the narrative says there was roughly 140 of these built throughout time. Now, these castles not only usually sported a large cannon on the top, but they were also the home to anywhere from 15 to 25 soldiers, with usually one commanding officer. And these buildings were very intricately designed. They had different quarters for living, but they also had storage facilities for ammo, and many of them also were built on top of either wells or running water or fresh water. So these buildings could be used basically to camp out at for these militaries and armies for long periods of time. They could stay, it is written, for a whole winter if they had to in a building like this, and I found that to be very interesting. Now, these were built with the thickest of masonry walls, and they were built supposedly by the armies and the militaries of the said countries that they were built in. So these were never pre-existing. Now, it's also written in the narrative that some of these contained moats, and I found that interesting because when we think about old world castles in art and different things like that, we always think about the moat, but we rarely see it in real life when we're looking at these castles. But maybe the idea of a moat as a defensive mechanism and depicting that in art, maybe it came from these Martello Towers. Now, as I said, here is one of the cannons, and you can see how it is maneuverable all around the top of the building. So you get a 360 view of what is incoming, and basically it's an easily defendable little fort. And I found it to be a really interesting design. Now, there are not many depictions of the interior of these buildings, but I did try and include some of them, and you'll see it is really fine masonry that they use to construct these. And a lot of these buildings nowadays are heritage sites. Some of them were repurposed into government buildings, but even more of them were repurposed into other buildings, and some of them even became private homes. And those are the ones that are really interesting to look at today, and they're really beautiful. So I just thought I would include a few more photographs of those, and we'll get more into the narrative in a little bit. So according to the narrative, these Martello Towers were decommissioned, or quote unquote, and this is the word the narrative uses, discontinued after 1870. So basically after that time, these governments refused to give funding to construct these buildings anymore. But then they sort of had a resurgence in their usage in the 1930s when the tops of these buildings, basically where the cannons used to sit, these areas were repurposed as anti-aircraft platforms. So they again began to house soldiers, and I found that to be really interesting. But you will see that if you look for modern photographs of these, a lot of them are in recreational areas and on the coastline near beaches. Now, I found these Martello Towers from doing my research into dovecotes and the Grubenhaus, or the grub houses, and I have videos on those if you'd like to check them out. But I was just really fascinated by these buildings and how well they're constructed, the intense nature that they were used for. Basically, they would store what they needed and they could last, years in a fortress like this. And I just found that to be something that was really remarkable, and it makes you wonder about the narrative of all these massive castles that were being built at the same time. We're told that all these castles we see worldwide were put up in a matter of weeks or months, and realistically it seems more believable that fortresses like this were being constructed.
A lot of the most interesting and I would say intricate, just based off of the location of these Martello Towers, would be the ones that are built directly on top of water, either on lakes or rivers. Those are the ones that are really the most breathtaking to me.
Another interesting fact about these Martello Towers is that the narrative says they were created with raised doorways, or doorways that were 10 to 20 feet off of ground level. And this was done basically to limit access. There would only be one entrance, and this entrance would be 10-20 feet off the ground. And they would use a ladder, which once all the troops were inside, they would pull the ladder inside. So it's much like the concept of a child's treehouse. Basically, you drop down the rope, you let in who you want, you pull the rope back up, and it's sort of a very interesting little defense mechanism that they say was developed when creating these Martello Towers. So I'm just gonna wrap up the video with a good compilation of these Martello Towers that are still remaining to this day, as well as some of the oldest photographs that I could find of these Martello Towers. Some of these photographs will be right after they were built, and some, like this one, is what happened to them and them in their current state. But these were all very interesting to me. They all bear a similar resemblance to one another, although many of them have unique features that make them their own building. And not only are many of these Martello Towers built with red brick or other ancient masonry, and they're very beautiful and they lend to the old world construction, but I'd also never really heard these discussed before, whether it is in regards to their old world nature or into the army's use and the different militaries that used and supposedly built these constructions. So I just wanted to get into that with you guys today. I wanted to show you these different photographs, and I'm just gonna wrap it up with a few more of the oldest or most unique photographs of these remaining Martello Towers that I could find. And I would love to hear your thoughts and comments about these wonderful buildings down below. And let me know in the comments if this is the type of old world structure that you could see being repurposed and turned into a home, and if that's something that you think you would enjoy.